The following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network.
Welcome to the Leadership Evolution Podcast, where we explore what happens after the build. I'm Luke Mickelson, founder, leader, and someone who's walked through the challenges of growing an organization, letting go, and learning how to lead in a completely new way. This podcast is for founders, executives, and leaders who are navigating growth, identity, and the tension between control and legacy. Because building something great is only the beginning. Learning how to evolve with it, that's the real work. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Leadership Evolution Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Mickelson. I'm so excited today to have an amazing guest. You know, our guests come on, they're successful people that have drawn themselves to building something that is probably going to outlast them. At least that's what we all hope for. And today is no different. I'm visited today with a guest, Christopher W Quigley. Have I got that right, Chris?
You got that. You're close enough.
Okay, good deal. And I apologize. We're a little running on I don't know what you call it. I got some challenges with my normal streaming system on this podcast, and so we're shooting a little bit from the hip. But you know what? Today is all about just being open and honest with what we have dealt with, right, during our growth and leadership evolution. So, Chris is. I'll read your bio real quick, so everybody gets knows a little bit more about you, and then we'll dive in. So, Chris is an interdisciplinary artist, designer, and founder whose work explores themes of transformation, impermanence, and what remains after systems break down. With more than 20 years of experience in interior design, custom fabrication, and large-scale public art, he creates immense installations that change audiences to engage with different social and personal issues. After surviving 2 strokes in 2023, Chris's relationship with work, control, and leadership changed dramatically. The experience led him to create the Alchemy Art Workshop, the nonprofit home for projects like transformation of dangerous spaces, the listening room, Crucible, and his upcoming book, Things I Lost in the Fire. Along the way, he realized a truth many founders eventually face. If the mission depends entirely on the founder, it risks ending the founder. Building Alchemy forced him to rethink governance, delegation, and how to create something that can outlive its creator. His story is one of resilience, reinvention, and the evolution from builder to steward. How was that?
Very good.
Yeah, other than get stuck on a word. Chris, welcome to the Evolution Podcast.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this.
So let's kick it off. Let's get right to it. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from. You know, I think my first question to you is, how did you get into design and art?
Well, my background is actually I am interior designer by education and training only, but the majority of my career I have spent building large-scale architectural features for other artists, architects, interior designers, developers, and I've worked on projects all across North America, some of the largest. I worked for a company where we built the largest outdoor chandelier, which is in Cleveland, Ohio. Wow. And if you ever think of a place that needed a chandelier, it was downtown Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of.
We're just finishing up doing a project in Richmond, Virginia, which is a 27-story video facade with a light artist, where it's one of the largest and most ambitious outdoor public art installations on a building in recent years. Wow. I have built a successful business out of it. Wow. And after having the 2 strokes that you mentioned, I quickly realized that achievement and fulfillment aren't the same thing.
Yeah.
And so that changed the timeline for me.
Sure.
And I actually had to start looking at it really honestly to go, you know what? The type of strokes that I have, I will probably have another one or two. I'm not, that is not lost on me. And that I figured that if I only had 10 or 15 good years left, what work actually matters. And so the project itself, like the nonprofit that I founded, was born out of tragedy. It was the catalyst came after a woman in my small town was murdered. I had moved here after living in New York City for 10 years. I live on the far east coast of Canada in a very little tiny town of about 1,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And very big difference from moving from Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, 75th and Central Park West, all the way down to a little tiny town called Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, about 1,100 people. And this is where I got sick and recovered. And this town and its people really rallied around to get me back on my feet and get me healthy again.
You know, Chris, I'm also from a small town.
Are you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, not that small, but I grew up in a little town called Kimberly, Idaho, which was about 3,000 people. You know, back in the day. Tell me what looking back, and I tell this when I go on podcasts as well. Looking back, what kind of traits do you think developed you from living in a small town?
Well, I grew up in a small town in, we would call it about in the middle of Canada. It's Western Canada. I grew up on a horse farm. So I grew up riding rodeo. I grew up with horses and learning how to drive the hay truck when I was 11 years old. I think living with prairie people and having grandparents and my mother and my aunt and our neighbors who were all, they're prairie strong people. They are farmers by nature, and you learn a remarkable work ethic. You learn to become relied upon. You become somebody that is trustworthy, and you do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I got from living on a farm. And that kind of ethos and that ethic followed me through my entire career, through all my careers that I've had. And this one right now, wasn't something that I set out to become. I don't think anybody sets out to become a nonprofit leader. I didn't, I developed this to help solve a problem that I couldn't ignore. And understanding that I didn't lose my voice, and I did. I couldn't walk, and it was very difficult for me to talk, and I had to use a walker. And the reality of having the stroke forced me to understand my own mortality. And so when I decided to do this, I created the artwork first and then had to create the foundation underneath it to give it legitimacy and to give it strength and to make it go and make it develop at a scale that it really needed to be at. But those things just back in 2023 forced a reassessment of mortality and energy and purpose, and that success and meaning aren't the same thing. And so things shifted from building projects for other people to now I build what I like to call our containers for other people to visit and hopefully gain some information or gain some education or shift in some way. So it was built, like Alchemy was built after the artwork because I needed to build this at a scale that I couldn't do by myself.
Right. A lot of nonprofits and most nonprofit leaders I talk to, it is built out of a personal experience, a personal, not necessarily tragedy every time, but at least a personal experience either with themselves or someone local and someone they know, someone they love. And it's because of that when we build it, and I was no different, small town, I was 35 years old, and you're ringing the bell for me when you say success doesn't always mean fulfillment, and when you hear that and when you understand that, it's so clear because on paper, we probably were living pretty good lives, right? Most people would have killed to have the life that we had, but for me, anyways, deep down, there was just something missing, and I think it come from, living a life. I had kids. I was, in my career, yada, yada, yada. And I had this built up thought of what success looked like to me, and how I would measure that to know if I'm doing good in life and I'm making a difference and all this stuff. And then when you reach these points in your life, whether it's because of, in your case, you have a stroke or someone has someone die, or something changes in your life dramatically, where you stop and you go, okay, now what really does matter to me now? If what I used to think doesn't matter as much, what is it now? And when you don't get those questions, I think that can develop some real frustrations. Did you experience any of the similar things when, coming out of that, feeling like, what is it now that is important?
Yeah, and just to build on what you were saying, much like you, I'm 52 now. I'm turning 53 this year, and for the first half of my life, and for the first 50 years, I did very well. I can't deny it. I did very well, and when I got sick and I was presented with my mortality, I understood at a very, very quickly that none of it was coming with me. None of it. None of the accolades, none of the money, none of the furniture, none of the cars. Nothing was coming with me. Not even the clothes on my back. The only thing that was coming with me were the experiences that I had. And so I understood very quickly that, I had done very well. And whatever time I have left, I need to do good.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between the two.
Yeah.
And I needed to do with whatever time I have left and whatever energy I have left, and with the skills that I gained from, working corporate and working private, I'm able to parlay that into the nonprofit side quite easily, because I have a very different, it's a very different approach. But the foundation was needed. Like every business, a foundation is needed. And unlike a lot of artists think that they can do it all themselves. And this is not something that I can do by myself, because it's not about me standing up the middle of it forever. That is not something that I want. I want this to be able to be something, and creating the nonprofit organization, and we create, large scale pieces that kind of hit a lot of different notes. But I don't want to be in the center of it. I want it to be able to be something at some point that I can create a succession plan, that it's no longer about me. Because I think this is one of the things that I understood before with working private and working corporate. It was all on me.
Right.
And I was the problem solver. I had to figure out everything. I had to get it all. I had to create it all. This is a very different animal. The nonprofit structure is a very different animal, but it provides this kind of work, and the kind of work that we want to create. It provides us with a legitimate framework. What kind of fundraising and insurance purposes? And I have a board of directors I'm responsible to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge when we get to the nonprofit space. That's one, when you think of starting a business. I don't think you think about board of directors. You don't think about having quote bosses or people that you report to when you start your own company. Some of the best advice I ever got was, listen, you whatever company you start, whether it's nonprofit or for profit, it's not going to love you like you love it. At least not down the road. So, let me ask you a little bit about Alchemy. What kind of impact are you trying to and looking for when in your mission?
So, our mission is, and I want to make sure that I say this, is like I want this to become art that is a vehicle that can bypass defenses and create some level of reflection. There are conversations that only men can have. Transformation of dangerous spaces specifically is geared towards men and young men and boys. If we talk about, intimate partner violence and gender-based violence, this is an issue that men created. We are at the epicenter of it. Women and all the women's organizations that are out there are, we built the house, we stacked the wood, we set the fire. And what we've given women and those groups are little tiny buckets to help put out a fire we created. And this work in itself was meant to be a reckoning for young men to understand our socialization, how we are socialized with each other, how that transformation has happened from an analog source, like when we were young men, to now it's digital and affecting men on a scale that I don't think we fully comprehend. That, where it used to be in a locker room, it might have been 10 or 15 boys at a time where we would hear the jokes and the language of the vernacular. And there was a curriculum behind all of that. And now it's online where tens of millions of men and young men are being affected every day. It's a very different. And so that artwork, which what it's supposed to do is it focuses on different aspects of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence themes. But it's a reckoning and a reconciliation for men to go through, to go, oh, this is something I created. I have to be able to stop this. And it could be anything. And I look at this work as something that I was complicit in. I have laughed at jokes I shouldn't have, said things I shouldn't have. But I wasn't, to back it up with all of the work, we're not interested in creating awareness. And that's the one factor that I want to make very clear, that this isn't an awareness campaign. We're already aware. Everyone's already aware. What I was most interested in is just creating a reflection point and showing a mirror to how young men and men are socialized and why this continues to be a pervasive problem.
Did you always, when you looked into this problem, or you were first had the inspiration, were you thinking nonprofit, or were you just thinking, hey, I wanted to be able to create a space or create an environment or an opportunity for people to, reflect their journey?
Neither. The first idea was actually to buy the house that Elaine Mosher was killed in. That was the idea at first, to go in, buy the house, renovate it, and then turn it back over to one of the transition services here in Canada and donate it back and use it as a transition house for women that have had to leave those kind of relationships. So take something that was very bad and transform that space into something positive. And the organization, one of the first people that I went to one of the leaders of an executive director of one of the transition services here on the South Shore, and said, this is the idea that I have. I want to buy the house. I want to renovate it. And we're going to donate it back. And she was like, thank you, but no thank you. And I was devastated, but I was like, what do you mean? Like, that didn't compute to me right away. What do you mean you don't want to take a free house? She was like, what are you talking about? She says, I looked you up. She said, I looked you up. And her, given her background, she has to look up people. And, there's not a lot of middle-aged white guys wanting to get into this field of work. So she had to look me up for her safety and to be like, who is this person? And she saw my history. She saw my portfolio. And she saw what I was trying to do and what I had been planning on doing. And she just asked me quite point blank, would you be interested in creating an education piece for young men and boys? And I was like, yes. That's how it started. It was just that's what I want to do. And it was just a thunderbolt of, this is what it has to be. Because I had to look back at my own history of where was my curriculum taught? And it was in the boys' bathroom, in the locker room. And those were the places where there's very little oversight, there's very little influence from outside, and that's where it starts. For us, like, I don't know how old you are, but for me, that's where it started.
Sure.
That's where I learned that, the words and how to talk about women and talk about girls at the time was learned in the locker room from other boys that learned it from their fathers, their uncles, their grandparents, their brothers. So the work was born out of just being asked. That was it. And I took it really seriously. And when this is something that I can do, given my background, and I love using that word, I parlayed everything that I had ever done in my history into this project to go, I know how to do this. I can do this at a scale, and I can travel this across Canada and the United States as a large installation piece that would hopefully affect some people and confront some people
Yeah.
Much
So
like
as you
a
started,
modern day horror film or a house of horrors that you would see at the Midway.
hmm. So as you started it and it began to grow, it started taking legs of its own as the founder of it, right? What kind of personal sacrifice and commitment did you find that was maybe not expected when you started to scale?
Um, I funded this out of my pocket, so it was
Financially.
the number one. Yeah, we don't have funding. We're not publicly or privately funded. Well, we're privately funded by me,
Yeah.
but right now we haven't done any fundraising, and we're not at that stage. I'm not there where I need that yet, but we're getting very close.
Yeah.
The the sacrifices that I put in early on, because I am laser focused when I get in on something. When I have a project put in front of me, I don't have an issue putting in 16, 17-hour days to get something complete. So my health and given my history, I had to be very careful. And I still get, one of the major things that I deal with is post-stroke fatigue. So I was getting cognitive fatigue a lot, and I was constantly tired. And physically, it took a toll on me, and emotionally, it took an even larger toll on me because I had to dredge up a lot of historical, not even metaphorical issues, but it's like actual historical events that happened in my life that are part of this work, because this entire work is lived experience. The nonprofit is based on lived experience. And that was that's what cost me the most, was just the time and my own finances. And this project since then has created its own gravity, which I think is something that we all strive for, is that I've learned in my careers that I don't chase things. I don't chase after people, and I don't chase after opportunities. I always believe that me as a human being, I create enough gravity around myself that I attract opportunities, and I attract the people that are meant to be attracted to me in whatever format. And so this project, because of what it was, created its own gravity.
Wow.
And opportunities came out of it. And I was offered a book deal, which I wrote a book that will be coming out when the project launches, called Things I Lost in the Fire. And it is what I was asked was to write about why a project like this has to exist. And not what it is. I wasn't going to be walking people through the artwork or any of the artworks that we create, but creating this book around why. Why does this have to exist now? And why hasn't it been done before? So I wrote this book, and much like that laser focus, I put in 16 to 17-hour days writing a book, much like I kind of equated it a bit like Jack Kerouac on the road. And if you know anything about Jack Kerouac, he had a custom typewriter made for himself, where he would just sit, and instead of individual sheets of paper, all of his paper was on a spool. So all he had to do was just sit there and drink and smoke and whatever else he did, and just typed, and he just worked until it was done. So I took a little bit of that and wrote this book in about 12 weeks, 14 weeks.
Wow.
But it was that kind of laser focus. Was a lot of it is just the expenditure of time and energy that I had to be very careful. I would be very easily lost to it.
Yeah.
So, and I see that you've written some, so you get where I'm coming from.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it flows. I remember writing my book. There's periods of time it just flowed so easily, and then there's periods of time I just had to put the pencil down and walk away, and let those I'd like to say let those emotions come back. It's kind of funny how you can just tell when you're, like you said, laser focused, and you can tell when you're not, right? And it's trying to force a round peg in a square hole when you're not focused on it. Your freedom of thought and flow isn't as clear. Yeah, I know those times very well.
Yeah, and this is the first time I've ever written anything like this. I've done a lot of essays in the past, but being asked to put it into a book was like, oh my God, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if that's in my wheelhouse.
Oh, hey, it doesn't matter. What matters is it comes from your heart. And I think that's everybody's wheelhouse, right? And I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said here. What does in the future, down the road? I mean, what does Alchemy look like for success for you? What are you hoping to see?
So what I see is like we have a number of works that we're working on. We're working on a theater production. We are working on sculpture work. We are working on installation work as well. One of the newest ones is a large scale installation piece. But my goal with this as its executive director and its creative director is to branch out to work with other artists to help them create what they want to create at a scale that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. So again, like all my things that I work on, like transformation of dangerous spaces and the listening room. And the listening room is also another container where we just have 10 storytellers that get up and tell personal stories about themselves in this group of 50 people. There's no recording, no phones, no cameras, and it's just presence. And so for me, that artwork in it of itself it's spoken word, but the audience is just as participatory. And I let them know really early on that it's like, hey, you're part of this. Just because you're in the audience, it doesn't mean that this is a passive experience, that this is an active participation part for you to be present and actively listening to these storytellers. And we bring in amazing storytellers that are the lead storytellers. We had Betty Jean O'Coin, we had Liam McLaren, and in July, we've got Nick Hornby, who wrote About a Boy, Shattered, and High Fidelity. And so he'll be coming in and being the lead storyteller. And then we've got Lori Brown in September, who was a podcaster and broadcaster and TV host. And then we get normal people that just come in to tell their own personal story that they've been through and just have it be witnessed because people really want that. And so the Crucible is also going to be another container where we do record the conversations, much like what you and I are doing. But that's recorded. So and the book is also, I look at these as all containers, that all I'm doing is creating containers for people to enter in, experience, and leave behind, and hopefully take something with them. It's not a consumable in the way that we buy artwork or that we buy a trinket. This is a different kind of experience that, you just enter into this container for a short period of time. The book is only meant to be read in about 3.5, 4 hours, so that it's not a heavy investment of time, but it's dense. But Alchemia is also a container that we will be able to go, hey, we've got all these resources. We've got all this ability. I've got these fabricators. I've got technology. I've got things available to me that can help you take your project from where it is here and bring it all the way up here, because we can give them that opportunity to think bigger than what they could do necessarily on their own. So my goal with Alchemia is eventually for it to be able to function on its own without me and just run and help others and allow them to create at a scale that I don't think that they knew that they were capable of.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Chris, you're doing a fabulous job, and you're in a space, and that's one thing I loved about your story. You're in a space that, you're right. I'm surprised there's not a lot of people that have talked about this environment. As you were speaking earlier, I grew up. I was a single mom, single parent, family. I didn't have a dad, at least not later on in life, in high school and things of that nature. My dads were my coaches, right? Classrooms and locker rooms and practice fields and things of that nature. That's where I learned a lot of my stuff. Good or bad. I mean, trust me, there's both there, as you know, right? And so, but to think about, having a space where people get affected by those things in different ways, I'm sure. And to be able to, learn from each other and share maybe their some personal successes or failures or certain situations that have happened through art. What an amazing opportunity to express themselves and help others learn from those. Well,
and think about all the things that you've seen, movies, books, poems, paintings, you name it. All these things that live in your brain after you've already seen them. Like you might remember a line from a film that you're like, oh, wait a minute, I already know how this is going to end because I've seen it here. And that's that little, there's this liminal space in our brains where here's your emotional brain, and your emotional brain kicks in first. And it takes between 3 to 5 seconds for your logical brain to catch up. So you've got 3 to 5 seconds to make a decision whether or not it's good or bad. 3 to 5 seconds. And so the work that we create at Alchemia is meant to sit in that 3 to 5 second window. That's where prevention work lives. That's where adjustment and emotional regulation lives, is in that 3 to 5 second space for just long enough for somebody to go, oh, wait, I've seen this, or this is something that I have to bring up. I have to wait for my logical brain to catch up before I make a decision. And it came that all came to me from a Mr. Rogers. I don't know if you remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh yeah.
He sang a song called What Do You Do with the Mad That You Feel? And if you want to think about any song in the world that talks about prevention work and talks about emotionally regulating yourself, look at the lyrics to What Do You Do with the Mad That You Feel? He read that out in 1969 when he was soliciting for funds for PBS for his show. In 1969, I think he got 29 million in 1969, which was an incredible amount of money. And you got to think about that. What kind of education that man was able to put out to all of us kids, because I still remember that. I remember that song. I remember all of those things, all the lessons that I learned, and children don't have access to the same stuff anymore that we did. And I bring everything back to everything that we create, everything that our organization creates and wants to create lives in that 3 to 5 second space. And that's an incredibly short amount of time. You know, when we look at what the cost per second would be, it's way out there, but it is needed. And this is where we sit, and that's where we want to continue to sit, is in that little 3 to 5 second window.
Interesting. Chris, amazing. And I'm glad you're on the show today, because each of these messages, each of these stories that we hear and then we share, they change lives. They bring awareness to causes that otherwise are unheard of, and similar to the charity that I started, Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I stumbled on a cause or a need that I didn't even know existed, right? And what's interesting, especially with what you're doing with Alchemia and all these other boxes, really is exposing, a need that I think we know about. We just don't know how to address it, right? And you're doing a fabulous job, great work. I just want to wrap up real quick with a final question. As your platform and your brand, those are all common words nowadays that you and I didn't use 20 years ago, but this platform and brand that grows, and this is all part of our leadership evolution as your organization grows and expands, and hopefully expands past you, right? What kind of advice would you give people? Would you give starting founders, people that have run across their moment, right? Their situation or their event that's potentially changed their lives. What kind of advice would you give them to prepare for the sacrifices they might have to make, but also the evolution that's going to happen, maybe even a disconnection of evolution between their organization and themselves?
Yeah, I figured that was going to be a question, so I actually have notes on this for leaders, for other founders, and it's like, if he asks what you've learned, and one of the things that was number one on the list is, and this is going to sound really counterintuitive, don't become your organization's greatest asset.
Wow.
Because you'll eventually become its greatest limitation.
Wow.
It can't be about you. It can't be about you. It has to be about the work. The other one is that the mission the mission matters more than your role. And as the executive director and the creative director, it's not about my role. I think many founders and executive directors and creative directors of nonprofits feel as though that they need to protect their role at the expense of the mission.
Mm.
And I want to make myself at some point irrelevant, because it's evolution. And that level of evolution for other founders is that understanding that evolution is not abandoning your work or abandoning the mission or abandoning the project. It just means letting go. It just means letting go doesn't mean that you care less.
Yeah.
You have to be careful that you're not forming this around a personality. That the personality has to be there to push it forward, to get it going, but there has to be a point in time where you're comfortable enough and confident enough in the mission and the organization that it can run completely separately of you. Because if you have to be a part of it and you are indispensable, it's already failed.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
That's great. It's, and you're absolutely right. The struggle, especially when you start building the organization, the sacrifices that you put into it, the time, the energy, the money, all these things that matter. It's a sacrifice, and you're indebted. You become infused to this organization that you just are creating, and at the early stages, it does rely on you. It does rely on your passions and your growth and your needs and your sacrifices you're going to get it to a certain point. And I love your advice. Just understand that your goal is to be less relied on, less as a important or the influence if you want that organization to grow, which I can't imagine other nonprofits don't want to expand their mission and their reach to help as many people as they possibly can. And that's great advice that you shared is looking at that kind of like, it doesn't love you more than you love it. Just be prepared and understand that, look, your goal is not to promote you. It does maybe feel like that at first, right? Because you are it and it is you. And as it grows, but as leadership evolves and business evolves, they evolve differently. Humans evolve differently than organizations, and especially successful ones, right? And so that's great advice. That's great advice for all you founders out there that are starting out, or even CEOs, or even organizations or companies that are starting in organizations, different positions. You start building something, just understand that you want to build this past you, and that does require a level of letting go, understanding that, one of the I talk a lot about founder syndrome, and one of the disciplines that I talk about in founder syndrome that is very difficult for founders to understand and get past is when you experience what I call a relevance wound, right? Where you realize you're not as relevant, or at least it feels like you're not as relevant to your organization, this thing that you created. I'm so glad you were able to jump back on, and thanks for being on the show. It's a young podcast, and I want to open the space up for people like yourselves to share your story and share what you have to offer people, because I think that's the best part about podcasts is you get to hear other people's points of view, and what you are sharing with people and doing with these young men and these people that are expressing themselves in ways that I know I don't do that. I'm a locker kid, grow up type guy that keeps close to my chest and try to be the tough guy, right? And I think what you do is groundbreaking for humanity, for what we were trying to achieve as far as,
wow,
working and reaching inward, right? And trying to connect with, who we are as human beings. And, I think it's beautiful. And
I look at it from this perspective is that over the past 10 years, I have noticed that people have become profoundly lonely.
Mm.
We have all of this information and all of these voices screaming at us and constantly chattering at us, but nobody really listens. Nobody listens to us anymore. We used to sit around, for a millennia around a fire, and, storytelling is the oldest art form that we have. We used to share our stories with each other.
Yeah.
We used to share our successes and our failures and ask for help within our community. And we used to sit around a fire. This is what a fireside chat turned into. And that profound loneliness is only exacerbated by the technology that we have right now. It's making us further and further away. And each one of even with our listening rooms, it's done 50 people at a time. It's not done at, we're not at scale like 10,000 or 100,000 people. 50 people at one time.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's incredible.
But it's meant to give people that opportunity to sit around a fire, and just talk and be heard and be witnessed, and not be worried about it becoming a piece that goes onto the gram or goes onto Facebook. That it's a private, very safe place for men and women to get up and just tell whatever you want to talk about for 10 minutes. That's all it's meant to do.
Well, as we wrap up, Chris, I mean, is there any last things you want the audience to know or to take away from your experiences, both as, what you provide and the humanity, but as well as those the leadership evolution skills that you think you've honed in on?
So the last line that I'll use is to kind of understand that we all have, the real test isn't whether or not you can build it or create it. The real test is whether it can survive your absence. That's my parting comment for all of this. So anything that you create, you have to create it for yourself, but create it so that it can survive without you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Chris, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate you and working through this technology issue, but we've got it. I think we're going to be good. So you guys, everybody out there,
understandable now, man.
Absolutely. Well, we just listened to Chris Quigley and his amazing story of bringing an otherwise hidden or untalked about dilemma that we face in humanity, brings it to the forefront and allows us to explore those spaces that help us just be better humans. And I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Please like us on all the podcast platforms. We're out there everywhere. And till next time, this is Luke Mickelson with the Leadership Evolution Podcast, helping you realize you can build what outlasts you. Thank you for joining me on the Leadership Evolution Podcast. If something in today's conversation challenged you, stretched you, or made you think a little differently, that's the point. Growth always starts with awareness. And if you are struggling in your journey, if you feel like you are fading away from what you have built, visit my website, lukemickelson.com, and learn how you can take back your confidence and create lasting legacy. If you found value in this episode, please share it with another leader who may be in the middle of their own evolution. And remember, your role as a leader isn't just to build something successful. It's to build something that lasts. Build what outlives you.